We didn't do business together. We didn't have any relationship like that. Well, I didn't know Sammy, so I knew Gotti.
Cops have ugly things. Politicians have ugly things. We do f***ing wars, and we bomb countries and kill men, women, and children.
For years, people have wondered what Michael Franzese was really like when he was in the mafia world. Now, former mobster Sammy Gravano has finally broken his silence, revealing shocking truths. Was Michael truly the calm, loyal figure many believed him to be, or was there more behind his charm and control? Join us as we uncover the details of this revelation. Two kings in one empire. The world of organized crime in New York during the 1970s and 80s was shaped by two powerful forces, violence and intellect. On one side stood Salvatore "Sammy the Bull" Gravano, the feared underboss of the Gambino crime family. On the other stood Michael Franzese, the ambitious captain of the Colombo family, whose sharp mind turned illegal operations into million-dollar enterprises. Both men were products of the same criminal structure, yet their paths and principles could not have been more different. The mafia in those decades operated like a hidden empire. 5 families ruled the city: the Gambino, Genovese, Lucchese, Bonanno, and Colombo organizations. Each had a boss, an underboss, capos, and soldiers, bound by the ancient code of Omerta, silence above all. Within that structure, some ruled by fear, others by finance. Sammy Gravano and Michael Franzese became symbols of those two methods. Gravano earned his reputation the hard way. Born in Brooklyn, he was drawn into street gangs as a teenager. His quick temper and determination earned him respect early on. By the time he joined the Gambino family, he had already proven his loyalty through violence and discipline. Under the leadership of John Gotti, Gravano became one of the most trusted figures in the organization. He was not a businessman. He was an enforcer who ensured that every order was followed and every betrayal punished. His power came from fear and respect, both earned through action. Michael Franzese represented something entirely different. Raised in the world of organized crime, he was the son of John "Sonny" Franzese, the feared underboss of the Colombo family. Yet Michael did not begin his adult life wanting to follow that path. He attended college and studied pre-medical courses before his father's imprisonment pulled him back into life. Once inside, however, his intelligence and business sense set him apart from others. He was calm, strategic, and always looking for ways to profit without spilling blood. The New York underworld of that time was divided into clear zones of influence. Power rested with those who could command loyalty, money flowed to those who could build networks, and silence protected them all from the law. Gravano's strength was enforcement. He ruled through action, using force to maintain order within one of the city's most dangerous families. Franzese, on the other hand, built wealth through innovation, finding ways to turn criminal activity into structured, profitable systems that looked almost legitimate from the outside. The difference in their methods created two very different reputations. Gravano was feared, but respected for his honesty about the life. He understood its brutality and accepted its rules without excuse. Franzese was admired for his intelligence and composure. He dressed like a corporate executive, spoke like a banker, and made money like a businessman. To many within the underworld, he was proof that the mafia could adapt to the modern world. Despite their contrasting approaches, both men shared the same code: loyalty, secrecy, and respect for the hierarchy governed every decision they made. Each had to navigate a dangerous system where betrayal was punished by death, and weakness could mean exile or imprisonment. What set them apart was how they interpreted that code. Gravano believed loyalty was proven through sacrifice and honesty within the ranks. Franzese saw loyalty as a means of survival and success, not necessarily tied to violence. By the early 1980s, both had become powerful symbols of different mafia philosophies. So, If both men lived by the same code, why did one become feared for his crimes, while the other became celebrated for his redemption? The rise of the good mobster. Michael Franzese's rise within the Colombo crime family marked a new chapter in the history of organized crime. Unlike many mobsters of his generation, he relied more on business strategies than on brute force. His intelligence, calm personality, and understanding of legitimate industries allowed him to create wealth in ways that the Mafia had never seen before. Michael was born in Brooklyn in 1951. His father, John "Sonny" Franzese, was already one of the most feared and respected figures in the Colombo family. Growing up, Michael witnessed both the power and danger that came with his father's position. Although he was surrounded by crime, he initially wanted to live a normal life. He attended Hofstra University and planned to become a doctor. That dream changed in 1970 when his father was sentenced to 50 years in prison for bank robbery. Michael dropped out of school and decided to support his family by entering his father's world, organized crime. From the beginning, Michael stood out. He understood that the future of the Mafia lay not only in street rackets, but also in large-scale financial operations that looked legitimate. By the mid-1970s, he had become a made man in the Colombo family. Instead of focusing on gambling or extortion, he turned his attention to high-profit business schemes. He worked with legitimate companies in construction, film, and sports management, while secretly channeling profits through the family's network. His most famous operation became known as the gasoline tax scheme, one of the largest financial scams in American criminal history. The idea was simple but brilliant. Michael and his associates created a chain of shell companies to buy gasoline wholesale and sell it to gas stations. When the time came to pay federal and state fuel taxes, the companies would vanish, keeping the tax money as profit. Before authorities could track them down, new companies would appear to continue the operation. At its peak, the scheme was bringing in as much as $7 to $8 million a week. The profits were staggering, and for a time, law enforcement had no idea how to stop it. This made Michael one of the wealthiest mobsters in the United States, earning him recognition even among rival families. Unlike others who flaunted their wealth with violence and attention, he remained composed and businesslike. He wore tailored suits, lived in luxury, but stayed away from public chaos. His ability to manage criminal activity with the discipline of a corporate executive changed how the Mafia viewed power. Michael built networks that involved accountants, lawyers, and financial experts. He treated his crew like employees, giving them specific roles and expecting professional behavior. That mindset made him seem untouchable, a man who could operate both inside and outside the law. Public fascination with him grew quickly. The media began to portray him as the mobster with morals, the rare figure who combined intelligence with restraint. He appeared in magazines, documentaries, and interviews, speaking confidently about money, loyalty, and family. People admired his calmness and saw him as different from the violent mobsters of old inside the Mafia. However, not everyone agreed with that image. Some respected his success, while others suspected that such visibility brought unnecessary attention. Eventually, federal authorities uncovered the gasoline tax fraud. In 1986, Michael pleaded guilty to racketeering and tax charges and served about 8 years in prison. When he was released in 1994, many expected him to disappear. Instead, he reinvented himself. He began speaking publicly about his experiences, writing books, and giving motivational talks about faith and transformation. To the public, Michael became a symbol of redemption, proof that even a man from one of the most dangerous criminal families could change his life. He appeared on television, collaborated with churches, and built a career as a motivational speaker. His calm, articulate way of explaining the life and his departure from it won him admiration across the world. However, inside law enforcement and among former associates, questions never stopped. How had he managed to leave the Mafia alive and untouched? How could a man so deeply involved in one of the most profitable rackets walk away without consequences? For years, those questions hung in the air. Michael's transformation created a powerful illusion that he had escaped the life through faith and intelligence alone. It was a story many wanted to believe, one that turned him into a public figure rather than a former criminal. But decades later, another voice from that same underworld would challenge everything he stood for. If Michael Franzese built his reputation on intellect and composure, what would happen when someone who lived by violence and truth decided to expose the other side of the story? Michael Franzese in his father's shadow. John "Sonny" Franzese stood as a symbol of old-school power in the American Mafia, a man whose name inspired both fear and respect. As the underboss of the Colombo crime family, Sonny represented everything the mob once stood for: silence, discipline, and unbreakable loyalty. His son, Michael Franzese, grew up under that immense shadow, surrounded by the influence of one of the most powerful crime figures in New York. From an early age, Michael's world was marked by quiet lessons about respect, family honor, and survival. Sonny's name was both a blessing and a burden, opening doors in the underworld while placing expectations that no ordinary son could easily fulfill. Michael was not always meant to follow his father's path. He was educated and ambitious, pursuing a future in medicine before life pulled him back toward the empire that bore his family name. Under Sonny's reputation, Michael quickly earned credibility. Other families knew whose son he was, and that alone commanded respect. Yet, Michael's approach differed from his father's. While Sonny built his authority through intimidation and reputation, Michael used charm, intelligence, and strategy. He modernized their influence, creating operations that generated millions without street-level violence. Still, he could never escape the perception that his success was tied to his father's legacy. Everything Michael achieved was compared to Sonny's rule. Their relationship was complex. Sonny was a man of strict codes and unwavering loyalty, while Michael was part of a newer generation that valued business over bloodshed. Sonny viewed honor as something unbending. Once you took an oath, it defined you for life. To him, the Mafia was a sacred brotherhood that demanded absolute devotion. Michael, however, saw an opportunity to evolve, to profit without drawing unnecessary attention. The contrast between them reflected the shifting nature of organized crime in America. Even as Michael built his own empire, his father's influence followed him everywhere. Associates often saw Michael as Sonny's boy, no matter how rich or powerful he became. When Michael eventually distanced himself from the criminal life, his decision caused deep pain within the family. Sonny reportedly could not believe that his son could walk away clean. In the old Mafia world, one did not simply retire. You either stayed loyal, disappeared, or betrayed someone. Michael's choice to leave made him a mystery, even to those who once trusted him. Sonny's disapproval was rooted in principle, not hatred. He had spent his entire life believing in the code of silence, the same code that had cost him his freedom. To see his son step out and publicly reject that world was difficult for him to accept. Still, the emotional distance between them showed a clash of eras. The old Mafia built on iron loyalty versus the new generation that valued reinvention. As Michael began to rebuild his image outside the mob, Sonny remained a symbol of what that world once demanded. Even late in life, Sonny's name carried weight. He served more than 4 decades in prison, one of the longest sentences served by a Mafia figure. Yet he never cooperated with authorities. That loyalty defined him until his death in his early hundreds. Michael, on the other hand, turned his story into a lesson about redemption and transformation, something his father could never fully understand. But could anyone truly walk away from the Mafia without betraying either the law or the code? The Bull's Code. Sammy the Bull Gravano represented the brutal heart of the Mafia's code: loyalty, power, and fear. He was not born into privilege or legacy like Michael Franzese. He built his name through pure toughness and unwavering obedience. Gravano's rise began under the Gambino family in New York, one of the most dominant of the five families. By the late 1970s, he had become a trusted soldier, and later the underboss under John Gotti, earning respect as a man who never hesitated to enforce the family's will. Gravano was a product of the Mafia's purest form. Violence was not reckless, but a tool of discipline. He was involved in 19 confirmed assassinations, each tied to maintaining order and loyalty within the organization. His reputation as Gotti's enforcer grew after the assassination of Paul Castellano in 1985, which paved the way for Gotti's leadership. Gravano stood beside Gotti during that bloody transition, helping him rise to power and defend his position in one of the most publicized eras of organized crime. But the loyalty that defined Gravano's life was eventually tested. When federal investigators secretly recorded Gotti mocking and blaming him during private conversations, the illusion of brotherhood collapsed. Gravano realized that even in a world built on loyalty, betrayal was inevitable. When he decided to cooperate with authorities, it shocked the entire mafia world. Unlike others who denied their past, Gravano confronted his truth directly. He admitted his crimes, accepted his reputation as a government witness, and lived with the consequences. To him, honesty about betrayal was more honorable than pretending innocence. He believed that most men who left the mafia had made some kind of deal. They just lacked the courage to say it. Gravano's views later put him in direct opposition to Michael Franzese. While Franzese promoted a story of faith, redemption, and walking away without betrayal, Gravano saw that narrative as false. In his eyes, no one walked away from that life clean unless there was an arrangement behind closed doors. Who then truly understood the code? The man who redefined it, or the man who refused to change? Clash of beliefs. By the time the 1990s faded and the new century arrived, the paths of Sammy Gravano and Michael Franzese had become complete opposites, yet their names were often mentioned together. One, the feared underboss, who became a government witness. The other, the good mobster, who claimed to have walked away clean over the years. What started as quiet disapproval evolved into a public clash of principles. It was not about revenge or territory, but about the meaning of loyalty and truth within the criminal code they both once lived by. Sammy Gravano, having admitted to his crimes and accepted the price of cooperation, could not understand how Michael had managed to leave the life without facing severe consequences. In the world they once shared, such a clean exit was nearly impossible. The mafia's code, known as omerta, demanded silence under all circumstances. Speaking with government officials, even for self-defense, was seen as betrayal. Gravano, who had faced his own moral reckoning, often asked a question that echoed across podcasts and interviews. How could Michael walk free, travel openly, and live as a public figure without having made some kind of arrangement with the same authorities they once swore to resist? Michael Franzese maintained his own version of events. He insisted repeatedly that he never testified against any mob associate, never put anyone behind bars, and left the life purely through his faith and conviction. His claim rested on the idea that he negotiated his own way out by stepping aside without turning on anyone. To his supporters, he represented transformation and courage. To skeptics like Gravano, his story sounded polished and incomplete. The tension between them grew stronger as Gravano began addressing the topic directly in his own platform, where he shared unfiltered views of mob life and its rules. He did not attack Michael personally. In fact, he often described him as intelligent and well-spoken. Yet he always added a critical note that sitting down with the government, even if no one was convicted, broke the sacred code of silence. For Gravano, integrity within the mob meant acknowledging one's sins fully, without trying to appear innocent. The divide between them was not based on crime, but on philosophy. Gravano came from an older school of thought, one that valued brutal honesty and the acceptance of guilt. He believed that if a man had to break the code to survive, he should own it without denial. Michael represented a newer idea, that survival could coexist with morality, and that walking away from a destructive life could be viewed as redemption, not betrayal. This disagreement turned into a psychological battle played out in public view. Gravano's followers admired his transparency. Even if they disliked his choices, Franzese's supporters saw him as a symbol of change, someone who had conquered a dark world without losing his dignity. Their conflict reflected two sides of the same legacy. Both men wanted to define what honor meant after the fall of the Mafia's golden era. For Sammy Gravano, redemption without confession was hypocrisy. He had faced prison, isolation, and public scorn because he had chosen to reveal the truth about his crimes. He believed that pretending to leave the Mafia clean was an illusion meant for cameras, not reality. For Michael, his survival and peace were earned, not given. He viewed his freedom as proof that a man could break free from the cycle of crime through willpower and faith. Both men had escaped death and imprisonment, yet neither could escape the shadow of their pasts. Every interview, podcast, and appearance reignited the same question: who truly upheld the code? The man who admitted betrayal, or the man who denied it? This silent war of words became one of the most fascinating rivalries in the modern discussion of organized crime. Could the truth between them ever be settled face to face? The truth, Sammy Gravano revealed when Sammy Gravano and Michael Franzese finally sat across from each other in Scottsdale, Arizona, for the filmed conversation titled "Table in the Back." It felt like history circling back on itself. For decades, both men had spoken about one another from a distance. Now, they were eye to eye. The setting was calm, almost too calm for what it represented. The room was softly lit, with a table placed between two men who once belonged to rival families but shared the same code of silence. The air carried tension that words could barely mask. Both men entered the conversation with composure, yet behind every smile lay decades of pride, pain, and principle. The dialogue centered on loyalty, betrayal, and survival, themes that had defined their lives in very different ways. Gravano spoke from experience as the Gambino underboss who had admitted to 19 assassination and testified against John Gotti. Michael, in contrast, spoke as the reformed ex-captain who claimed to have left the life clean, guided by faith rather than fear. Gravano's voice remained steady as he stated his belief that no one leaves the Mafia without cooperation. He reminded Michael that even sitting down with government officials went against omerta. For him, honor was not about being liked, but about accepting every part of one's past, including betrayal. Michael responded calmly, defending his record. He pointed out that he never took the witness stand against any member of the Mafia, and that his exit was the result of negotiations that harmed no one. He emphasized that his transformation came from personal conviction, not compromise. Their tones were measured, almost polite, but the weight of their words carried the sting of old truths. What made the exchange powerful was not shouting or hostility, but restraint. Two men who once thrived in worlds of power and violence now spoke with deliberate respect. Each listened, nodded, and responded without losing composure. But beneath the civility, an invisible war unfolded. Gravano represented the brutal honesty of the old Mafia. Where codes mattered more than comfort, Franzese embodied the post-Mafia era, where storytelling and redemption reshaped legacy. Observers could feel the divide between them like a quiet current. In the room, Gravano's expression showed disbelief that anyone could walk away untouched. Michael's confidence reflected his belief that faith had freed him. Both men sought validation, one through truth, the other through transformation. As their discussion went deeper, they began to find faint traces of mutual understanding. Each recognized that the other had survived in a world that destroyed nearly everyone it touched. Both had endured betrayal, loss, and years under watch. Their differences came down to how they defined honor. For Gravano, it meant owning the darkest parts of himself. For Michael, it meant rising above them. By the time the cameras stopped, nothing had been resolved. There was no handshake of agreement or declaration of victory. The tension remained, but so did the respect each man had spoken his truth without surrendering it. Their meeting was more than a conversation. It was a symbolic reckoning between two versions of the Mafia's legacy, one rooted in unbreakable codes, the other in reinvention. The encounter left viewers with admiration, questions, and an unshakable curiosity about which man's truth would endure after the mob, redemption and reality. When the violence, whispers, and late-night meetings finally ended, both Michael Franzese and Sammy Gravano found themselves facing something harder than the law: life after the mob. The world that once gave them power, fear, and identity was gone. What remained was the question of who they would become once the streets went silent. Michael Franzese walked a path few believed possible. After leaving the Colombo crime family, he built a new identity as a motivational speaker, author, and Christian advocate. His transformation was not just public, it was strategic and deeply personal. He began touring universities, churches, and corporate events, speaking about crime, greed, faith, and redemption. His message focused on the dangers of fast money and the illusion of power. He turned his past into lessons for others and became one of the most visible ex-mobsters in the world. Michael's story spread across television shows, documentaries, and interviews. He married Camille Garcia, a dancer he met during his time in Hollywood, and started a family. His marriage became a symbol of stability after chaos. His wife and children grounded him, giving him something the mob never could: peace of mind. He began using his platform to talk about forgiveness, faith, and transformation, often referencing his time in federal prison as the turning point that forced him to change. However, not everyone accepted his redemption story without question. Critics and former associates whispered that his public image might have started as a survival strategy. Some argued that his transformation into a faith-based public figure was not purely spiritual, but partly practical, a way to ensure his safety and rebuild his finances. Yet, no matter what people believed, Michael's consistency over the years made it hard to ignore his influence. He built a reputation as one of the few mob figures who truly walked away and stayed away. Sammy the Bull Gravano's path was very different. After cooperating with the government and entering witness protection, he lived quietly for a while but could not stay hidden. His personality was too loud, too direct, too raw. Eventually, he stepped back into the spotlight, not as a repentant preacher, but as a brutally honest storyteller. Through his YouTube channel and podcast, Our Thing, Sammy began sharing unfiltered stories about life in the Mafia. He spoke about homicide, betrayal, and loyalty without glorifying it. He explained his choices with a tone that was part confession, part justification. For many, it was shocking to see a man who once helped bring down John Gotti now freely discussing those years online. But Sammy saw it differently. He believed that telling the truth, even the ugly parts, was his own form of redemption. Unlike Michael, Sammy did not seek forgiveness through religion or speeches. His redemption was in honesty. He did not pretend to be a hero. He simply wanted people to understand what power, fear, and greed could do to a man's soul. In his later years, Gravano spoke openly about loneliness, regret, and the heavy price of survival. Both men share the same strange fate, alive but haunted. They outlived most of their peers, yet both live in the long shadow of their pasts. But can two men who lived by crime ever truly rewrite their truth? Two paths, one legacy. Michael Franzese and Sammy Gravano stand today as living symbols of two different exits from the same dark world. Both men escaped prison and death, but not their past. They represent two versions of truth, one polished, one raw, yet both remain bound to the same history. Michael's story became one of inspiration and discipline. To his followers, he represents the possibility of renewal. His message is that faith and determination can overcome even the deepest mistakes. He tours across America, speaking to young people, business professionals, and even inmates about transformation. His audience sees him as a reformed hero who turned his back on crime for good. Sammy's message, on the other hand, is about realism. He does not dress up his past or soften his crimes. He speaks directly to those who want to understand the mechanics of loyalty and betrayal. His words are sharp, unfiltered, and honest. To many younger fans online, Sammy represents survival and authenticity, a man who owns his past instead of running from it. Their differences create a fascinating mirror. Michael wants to prove that redemption can rebuild a man. Sammy wants to prove the truth can free one. Both deny each other's version of events. Michael believes Sammy's choices destroyed the code that once defined the mob. Sammy believes Michael's version of redemption is performance. Yet neither man can exist in the public imagination without the other. They are the last two giants of an empire that has already vanished. The symbolic message in their lives is powerful. There are no clean exits from organized crime. Every escape is a negotiation. Franzese negotiated with faith and reinvention. Gravano negotiated with confession and transparency. Both methods kept them alive, but neither freed them completely. The past follows them like a shadow that never fades. Younger generations now see them less as criminals and more as cultural figures. In podcasts, documentaries, and social media clips, they are discussed as icons of transformation and contradiction. Some admire Michael's calm wisdom, others respect Sammy's brutal honesty. Together, they form the full picture of what happens when power fades, but memory doesn't. Their legacies are lessons, not conclusions. They show that the Mafia's reach extends far beyond prison walls or headlines. It lives on in the minds of those who still debate whether loyalty or truth matters more. Franzese and Gravano each tried to escape by choosing one, faith or confession, yet both remain defined by the same world they left. Their names will always carry the weight of what they once were, and the uneasy question that still hangs over them. Can a man ever truly leave the life that made him who he is? If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and also click the next video shown on your screen.